Are you afraid of being alone? Not just physically alone, but truly alone. With yourself, with your thoughts, with the silence. Do you fill every moment with noise? With activity? With other people? Do you reach for your phone the instant you feel the emptiness? Turn on the television? Call someone? Anything to avoid the quiet. Anything to avoid being with yourself. And perhaps you do not even realize you are doing this. Perhaps it feels natural, feels necessary, feels like this is just how life is. But Clarice Lispector would ask, what are you running from? What are you afraid you will find in the silence? What do you think will happen if you are truly alone? Tonight, we explore solitude and silence through the eyes of Clarice Lispector, a Brazilian writer who understood that being alone is not the same as being lonely. That silence is not empty but full. That in the quiet, in the solitude, something profound happens. You meet yourself, not the self you present to others, not the roles you play, but your true self. The one that exists beneath all the noise, all the performance, all the doing. And this meeting is both terrifying and necessary, is what you have been avoiding, and what you most need. This is the still point, where we gather in the quiet hours to explore what it means to be truly alone. If you are called to this inquiry, subscribe. Be here as we enter the silence together. Let the world fall away. You are safe here, and the journey into solitude begins now. Insight 1, the fear of your own company. And perhaps you cannot remember the last time you were truly alone, truly quiet, with no distractions, no obligations, no one needing you, no screens, no sounds, just you. And perhaps when you imagine this, you feel uncomfortable, feel anxious, feel like something is wrong, like you should be doing something, should be with someone, should be productive, should be connected. And this discomfort, this anxiety, this sense that something is wrong reveals something. Reveals that you are afraid. Afraid of your own company. Afraid of what you will find when there is nothing to distract you from yourself. And Lispector understood this fear. Understood that we fill our lives with noise because we are afraid of the silence. Fill our time with others because we are afraid of ourselves. And she would ask, why? Why are you afraid of being alone with yourself? What do you think you will discover? That you are boring? That you are empty? That without others to define you, you are nothing? And perhaps this is the fear. The fear that if you strip away all the roles, all the relationships, all the doing, there will be nothing left. That you are only real when reflected in someone else's eyes. Only exist when needed by someone else. Only matter when doing something for someone else. And this fear is especially strong for women, because women are taught to be relational, to define themselves through others, as daughter, as wife, as mother, as caregiver, as friend, always in relation to someone else, always defined by how they serve, how they care, how they connect. And in this constant relationality, they lose themselves, lose the ability to be alone, lose the capacity to exist without reference to someone else. And so being alone feels like disappearing, like ceasing to exist, like becoming nothing. And this is terrifying, is why you fill every moment, why you cannot bear the silence, why you are afraid of your own company. And perhaps you are at the age where this is changing, where children have left, where relationships have shifted, where you find yourself alone more often. And this feels like loss, feels like abandonment, feels like something has been taken from you. But Lispector would say, this is not loss, is opportunity, is the chance to finally meet yourself, to discover who you are when you are not being someone for someone else, to find out what you think, what you feel, what you want when no one is asking, when no one is needing, when no one is watching. This is the call to solitude, the call to discover that being alone is not the same as being lonely, that you can be your own company, that you are enough. Insight 2, the noise that drowns out truth. And look at how you fill the silence, how you cannot bear quiet, how you turn on music, television, podcasts, anything to have sound, how you scroll through your phone, how you text, how you call, how you make sure there is always noise, always distraction, always something between you and the silence. And Lispector would ask, where are you drowning out? What voice are you afraid to hear? What truth are you avoiding? Because the noise is not neutral, is not just preference, is protection, is defense, is the way you keep yourself from hearing what you know but do not want to acknowledge. And in the silence, things emerge. Feelings you have been pushing down, thoughts you have been avoiding, truths you have been denying. The silence does not create these things. They are already there, have always been there. But the noise drowns them out, keeps them buried, keeps you from having to face them. And so you keep the noise going, keep the distractions coming, keep yourself too busy, too occupied, too connected to ever have to be quiet, to ever have to listen, to ever have to hear what your own soul is trying to tell you. And perhaps you do not even know what you are avoiding. Perhaps the noise has been there so long that you have forgotten what silence feels like, have forgotten what it is like to hear your own thoughts without interruption, your own feelings without distraction, your own truth without the voices of others drowning it out. And Lispector would say, you must find out, must turn off the noise, must enter the silence, must listen to what emerges, not because it will be comfortable, not because it will be easy, but because it is yours, is your truth, is what you need to hear, is what you have been running from. And you cannot live authentically while running, cannot know yourself while drowning out your own voice, cannot be whole while fragmented by constant noise. And this is especially true for women, because women are taught to listen to everyone else, to attune to others' needs, to hear what is not said, to read the room, to make others comfortable. And in this constant listening to others, they stop listening to themselves, stop hearing their own needs, their own desires, their own truth. And the noise helps this, helps them stay focused outward, helps them avoid the inward turn, helps them continue to be what others need rather than discover what they need. And the silence threatens this, threatens to reveal what they have been ignoring, what they have been sacrificing, what they have been denying, And so they avoid it, fill it, drown it out. Anything to not have to hear their own voice asking, what about me? What do I want? What do I need? Insight 3, the roles that define you. And perhaps you do not know who you are without your roles. Without being mother. Without being wife. Without being daughter. Without being professional. Without being caregiver. Without being friend. These roles have defined you for so long that you cannot imagine yourself without them. Cannot picture who you would be if you were not performing these functions. Not meeting these expectations. Not fulfilling these obligations. And Lispector would say, this is the problem. You have become your roles. Have forgotten there is a self beneath them. A self that exists independent of what you do for others. Independent of how you serve. Independent of who needs you. And perhaps these roles are changing. Perhaps children no longer need you in the same way. Perhaps relationships have ended or shifted. Perhaps work is no longer central. Perhaps the roles that defined you are falling away. And this feels like crisis. Feels like loss of identity. Feels like you are disappearing. Because if you are not mother, not wife, not professional, not caregiver, then who are you? What is left? What defines you? And this question is terrifying. Is why you cling to the roles even when they no longer fit. Even when they are exhausting. Even when they are killing you. Because without them, you fear you are nothing. But Lispector would say, you are not nothing. You are everything. Everything you have been too busy to notice. Too distracted to discover. Too afraid to meet. Beneath the roles is a self. A real self. Not the performed self. Not the acceptable self. Not the self that makes others comfortable. But the raw, true, essential self. The one that has desires you have never acknowledged. Thoughts you have never expressed. Dreams you have never pursued. This self has been there all along. Waiting for the roles to fall away. Waiting for the noise to stop. Waiting for you to finally be alone. Finally be quiet. Finally turn inward and ask, who am I really? Not who am I supposed to be? Not who do others need me to be? But who am I in my essence when no one is watching? And this discovery requires solitude, requires silence, requires being alone with yourself long enough to let the roles fall away, to let the performance stop, to let the true self emerge. And this is the call to stop performing, stop serving, stop being what others need, and start discovering what you are. Who you are, what you want, what you need, what you dream, what you desire, not in relation to anyone else, but in yourself, for yourself, as yourself. This is what solitude offers. This is what silence reveals. This is what you have been avoiding, and what you most need. Insight 4, the emptiness you fear. And perhaps the deepest fear is this, that if you are alone, if you are silent, you will discover you are empty. That there is nothing inside. That you are hollow. That all these years of being for others, doing for others, living for others, has left nothing for yourself. That you have given everything away and kept nothing. That you are a shell. A performance, a collection of rolls with no core. And this fear keeps you running, keeps you filling every moment, keeps you avoiding solitude. Because if you stop, if you are quiet, if you are alone, you might discover this emptiness. And then what? And Lispector understood this fear, understood that we are terrified of our own emptiness, terrified that we will look inside and find nothing, that we are not as deep as we pretend, not as interesting as we hope, not as substantial as we need to be. And so we avoid looking, avoid the inward turn, avoid solitude, avoid silence. Because as long as we are busy, as long as we are with others, as long as we are performing our roles, we can pretend we are full, can pretend we are substantial, can pretend we are enough. But alone, in silence, the pretense falls away, and we fear what we will find, or not find. But Lispector would also say, this fear is based on a lie. The lie that you are empty, the lie that there is nothing inside, the lie that you are only real in relation to others. Because the truth is the opposite. The truth is that you are full, full of thoughts you have never thought, feelings you have never felt, desires you have never acknowledged, dreams you have never pursued. The truth is that you are so full that you have been afraid of your own fullness, have been afraid of what you might want, what you might feel, what you might become if you allowed yourself to be. And so you have kept yourself empty, have given everything away, have lived for others, not because you are naturally empty, but because you are afraid of your own fullness. And solitude reveals this. Silence reveals this. When you stop performing, stop serving, stop being for others, you discover you are not empty. You are full, full of yourself, full of your own thoughts, feelings, desires, dreams, full of a self you have been ignoring, a self you have been denying, a self you have been afraid of. And this self is not nothing, is everything, is what you have been searching for in others, in relationships, in roles, in constant doing. But it was never out there, was always in here, in you, in the solitude, in the silence, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be lived. Insight 5, the silence that speaks. And Lispector understood that silence is not empty, is not the absence of sound, is not nothing. Silence is full, full of what cannot be said, full of what is too true for words, full of the deepest reality. And in silence, you hear things you cannot hear in noise. You hear your own heartbeat, your own breath, your own thoughts without the interference of others' voices, your own feelings without the distraction of others' needs, your own truth without the drowning out of constant stimulation. And this hearing is profound, is revelatory, is what you have been missing. And perhaps you have forgotten how to be silent, have forgotten how to sit without doing, how to be without performing, how to exist without producing. And this forgetting is not accidental, is cultural, is the result of living in a world that values productivity over presence, doing over being, noise over silence. And in this world, silence feels wrong, feels wasteful, feels like you should be doing something, should be productive, should be useful, And so you fill the silence. Fill it with activity. Fill it with noise. Fill it with anything that makes you feel like you are doing something. Like you matter. Like you are enough. But Lispector would say, you matter in the silence. You are enough in the stillness. You do not need to be doing to be valuable. Do not need to be producing to be worthy. Do not need to be useful to be real. You are real in the silence, are valuable in the stillness, are enough in the being, and in the silence you discover this. Discover that you do not need to earn your existence. Do not need to justify your being. Do not need to prove your worth. You simply are. And this is enough. This has always been enough. But you could not hear this in the noise, could not feel this in the constant doing, could only discover this in the silence, in the solitude, in the being. And the silence speaks, not in words, not in explanations, not in arguments, but in truth, in feeling, in knowing. The silence tells you what you already know but have been afraid to acknowledge, tells you what you want but have been afraid to pursue, tells you who you are but have been afraid to be. And this telling is gentle, is patient, is always there, waiting for you to stop, to be quiet, to listen, waiting for you to enter the solitude, to embrace the silence, to hear what has been trying to reach you all along, your own truth, your own self, your own life waiting to be lived. Insight 6, the call to solitude. And so the call comes, not as command, not as obligation, but as invitation, an invitation to be alone, to be silent, to discover what you have been avoiding, what you have been running from, what you have been filling your life with noise and activity and others to avoid facing. The call asks, can you be alone? Can you be silent? Can you meet yourself without the roles, without the performance, without the constant doing? Can you discover who you are when you are not being anything for anyone? Can you hear your own truth in the silence? Can you find your own fullness in the solitude? And this call is especially strong now, at this age, at this stage, when roles are changing, when children are leaving, when relationships are shifting, when the life you built is transforming. This is not accident, is not crisis, is opportunity, is the universe creating space, creating silence, creating solitude, so you can finally meet yourself, finally discover who you are beneath all the roles, finally hear your own voice, finally live your own life, not the life others need you to live, not the life you thought you should live, but the life that is yours, the life that has been waiting, the life that can only be discovered in solitude, in silence, in the brave act of being alone. And Lispector would say, do not be afraid. The solitude will not destroy you. The silence will not reveal emptiness. You will not disappear if you are alone. You will appear. Your true self will emerge. Your real voice will speak. Your authentic life will begin. Not when you find the right person. Not when you achieve the right thing. Not when circumstances are perfect. But now, in the solitude, in the silence, in the brave choice to be alone, to be quiet, to listen, to discover, to become. This is the call. This is the invitation. This is what your life is asking of you. Will you answer? Will you enter the solitude? Will you embrace the silence? Will you meet yourself? Now we hold up the mirror, and what you see will not be comfortable. We'll show you how you have been running, how you have been filling every moment, how you have been avoiding yourself. The mirror shows you the patterns, the ways you escape solitude, the ways you drown out silence, the ways you keep yourself from ever having to be alone, from ever having to be quiet, from ever having to meet yourself. And Lispector would say, this seeing is necessary, is the beginning of change, because you cannot choose solitude until you see how you avoid it, cannot embrace silence until you recognize how you feel it, cannot meet yourself until you acknowledge how you have been running. The mirror is not judgment, is recognition, is the honest seeing of what is, so you can choose what will be. Insight 7, the constant connectivity. Look at your phone. How many times today have you checked it? How many times have you reached for it without thinking? How many times have you felt the phantom vibration, the pull to see if someone has messaged, if someone has liked, if someone has responded? And Lispector would ask, where are you seeking? Where are you avoiding? Because the phone is not neutral, is not just a tool, is a way to never be alone, to always be connected, to always have someone else's voice in your head, someone else's needs, someone else's presence. And in this constant connectivity, you lose yourself, lose the ability to be alone, lose the capacity for solitude. And perhaps you do not even realize how constant it is, how automatic, how you reach for the phone the moment you feel bored, the moment you feel uncomfortable, the moment you feel the emptiness. It has become reflex, has become habit, has become the way you avoid ever having to be with yourself, ever having to feel what you feel, ever having to think what you think without the distraction of others' thoughts, others' lives, others' traumas. And the phone provides this perfectly, provides endless distraction, endless connection, endless noise, so you never have to be quiet, never have to be alone, never have to face yourself. And the mirror shows you this, shows you how many hours you spend scrolling, how much time you spend in others' lives instead of your own, how you use the phone to avoid the present moment, to avoid being here, to avoid being with yourself. And you see the cost. See how this constant connectivity has disconnected you from yourself. How you no longer know what you think because you are always consuming others' thoughts. No longer know what you feel because you are always responding to others' feelings. No longer know who you are because you are always being someone for someone else. Online, available, connected, but not to yourself. Never to yourself. Always to others. Always away from the solitude. Always running from the silence. And Lispector would say, put it down. Turn it off. Create space. Not forever. Not as rejection of connection, but as practice, as experiment, as a way to discover what happens when you are not constantly connected, when you are not always available, when you are alone with yourself, with your thoughts, with your feelings, with the silence. What will you discover? What will emerge? What have you been avoiding by always being connected? This is what the mirror asks. This is what you must face. If you want to know yourself, if you want to find solitude, if you want to embrace silence, you must put down the phone, must disconnect, must be alone. Insight 8, the busyness that fills time. And look at your schedule. How full is it? How many commitments? How many obligations? How many things you must do? And Lispector would ask, is this necessary? Or is this avoidance? Because busyness is a socially acceptable way to avoid solitude, to avoid silence, to avoid yourself. You can say, I am too busy. I have too much to do. I do not have time to be alone, to be quiet, to reflect. And everyone understands. Everyone accepts. Because we live in a culture that values busyness. That equates busy with important, with valuable, with worthy. And so you fill your time, fill your schedule, fill every moment with doing, with obligations, with commitments, and call it necessary, call it responsible, call it life. But is it? Or is it escape? And the mirror shows you the pattern, shows you how you say yes to everything, how you take on more than you can handle, how you create obligations that keep you from ever having free time, from ever having empty space, from ever having to be alone. And you do this unconsciously. Do this automatically. Do this because being busy feels better than being still, feels more acceptable than being alone, feels more valuable than being quiet. And so you keep yourself busy, keep yourself obligated, keep yourself from ever having to face the emptiness, the silence, the solitude. Because if you are busy enough, you do not have to feel, do not have to think, do not have to be with yourself. Can just keep doing, keep moving, keep running. And perhaps you are exhausted. Perhaps you are burned out. Perhaps you are wondering why you are doing all of this. And Lispector would say, because you are afraid. Afraid of what will happen if you stop. Afraid of what you will find if you are not busy. Afraid that if you have empty time, you will have to face yourself. And this is more frightening than exhaustion. More frightening than burnout. More frightening than the constant doing. And so you keep going. Keep filling. Keep avoiding. Until you cannot anymore. Until your body stops you. Until life stops you. Until you are forced into the solitude you have been avoiding. The silence you have been running from. The meeting with yourself you have been postponing. And the mirror asks, what if you chose it? What if you stopped before you were forced to stop? What if you created space before space was created for you? What if you said no to some obligations? What if you left some time empty? What if you allowed yourself to be unproductive? To be still? To be alone? What would happen? What would you discover? What have you been avoiding by staying so busy? This is the question. This is what you must face. if you want to find solitude, if you want to embrace silence, if you want to meet yourself, you must stop being so busy, must create space, must allow emptiness, must risk being alone. Insight 9, the relationships that define you. And look at your relationships. How much of your time is spent with others? How much of your energy goes to maintaining connections? How much of yourself do you give away? And Lispector would ask, who are you when you are alone? Do you know? Can you exist without reference to someone else? Without being someone something? Without a relationship to define you? Because perhaps you have built your entire identity around relationships, around being needed, around being connected, around being in relation to others. And in this, you have lost the ability to be alone, to exist independently, to know yourself outside of relationship. And this is especially true for women, because women are socialized to be relational, to find identity through connection, to define themselves through others. As mother, as wife, as daughter, as friend, always in relation, always defined by the relationship. And this is not wrong, is not bad. Relationships are important. Connection matters. But when you can only exist in relationship, when you cannot be alone, when you do not know who you are without someone else, you have lost yourself, have become dependent on others for your sense of self, for your identity, for your existence. And this is dangerous, is fragile, is why being alone feels like death. Because without the relationship, you fear you are nothing. And the mirror shows you this. Shows you how you reach out the moment you feel alone. How you text. How you call. How you make plans. How you ensure you are never truly alone. Never truly without connection. Never truly having to exist independently. And you see how this has become automatic. How you do not even question it. How it feels natural, necessary, right. But Lispector would ask, is it? Or is it fear? Fear of being alone. Fear of discovering you can exist without the relationship. Fear of finding out who you are when you are not being someone for someone else. And this fear keeps you connected, keeps you reaching out, keeps you from ever experiencing true solitude, true independence, true self-knowledge. And perhaps your relationships are changing. Perhaps people are leaving. Perhaps you are being left alone more often. And this feels like abandonment, feels like rejection, feels like loss. But Lispector would say, this is opportunity, is the chance to discover you can be alone, can exist independently, can know yourself outside of relationship. This is not rejection, is liberation, is the invitation to finally meet yourself. Not as someone something, not in relation to anyone, but as yourself, alone, independent, whole. And this is frightening, is unfamiliar, is not what you are used to, but is also necessary, is also freeing, is also the path to knowing who you really are. Beneath all the relationships, beneath all the roles, beneath all the ways you have defined yourself through others. Insight 10, the performance of being fine. And look at how you present yourself, how you perform being fine, being okay, being together, how you smile when you are sad, how you say you are fine when you are not, how you hide what you really feel, what you really think, what you really are. And Lispector would ask, why? Why do you perform? Why do you hide? Why can you not be real? And perhaps the answer is because being real requires solitude first, requires knowing yourself in silence before you can show yourself to others, requires meeting yourself alone before you can be authentic with anyone else. And you have not done this, have not been alone, have not been silent, have not met yourself. And so you perform, you present, you hide. And the performance is exhausting, is constant, is the way you move through the world, always managing how you appear, always controlling what you show, always hiding what is real. And you do this because you do not know what is real, do not know you are beneath the performance, do not know what you would show if you stopped performing. And this not knowing comes from lack of solitude, from lack of silence, from never being alone long enough to discover what is true, what is real, what is you. And so you keep performing, keep presenting, keep hiding, because the alternative is too frightening, is revealing you do not know yourself, do not know what you feel, do not know who you are. And the mirror shows you this performance, shows you how automatic it has become, how you do not even realize you are doing it, how the mask has become your face, the performance has become your identity, the presentation has become who you think you are, and you see the cost. See how exhausting this is, how lonely, how disconnected, because even when you are with others, you are not really there, are not really present, are not really yourself, are performing, are presenting, are hiding, and so you are alone even in company, are isolated even in connection, are lost even when surrounded, because you do not know yourself, have not met yourself, have not spent time in solitude discovering who you are beneath the performance. And Lispector would say, stop performing, stop presenting, stop hiding, but not with others first, with yourself first, in solitude, in silence. Meet yourself without the performance, without the presentation, without the hiding. Discover what is real, what is true, what is you. And then, only then, can you be authentic with others? Can you show yourself? Can you be real? Because you will know what is real, will know who you are, will have met yourself in the solitude, in the silence, in the brave act of being alone with yourself, without performance, without presentation, without hiding, just you, real, true, whole. Inside 11, the fear of missing out. And look at how you fear missing out. How you say yes to invitations you do not want. How you go to events that drain you. How you stay connected to people who exhaust you. How you keep up with everything. How you try to be everywhere. How you cannot bear the thought of missing something. And Lispector would ask, what are you really afraid of missing? The event? Or the proof that you exist? the connection, or the validation that you matter? Because FOMO is not really about missing out. It's about the fear that if you are not there, you do not exist. That if you are not connected, you do not matter. That if you are not included, you are nothing. And this fear keeps you from solitude, keeps you from silence, keeps you from ever choosing to be alone. Because being alone means missing out, means not being there, means not being included. And this feels like death, feels like disappearing, feels like ceasing to matter. And so you say yes. You go. You stay connected. You keep up. You try to be everywhere, even when you are exhausted, even when you do not want to, even when it costs you. Because the alternative, being alone, feels worse. Feels like missing out on life, on connection, on existence itself. And the mirror shows you this pattern, shows you how you cannot say no, how you cannot choose solitude, how you cannot bear to miss anything. And you see the cost. See how exhausted you are, how drained, how you have no time for yourself, no space for silence, no capacity for solitude, because you are always there, always connected, always included, always afraid of missing out. And in this constant presence, you miss out on the most important thing, yourself, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own life. Because you are so busy being present in others' lives that you are absent from your own. So busy being connected to everyone else that you are disconnected from yourself. So busy being included that you exclude yourself. And Lispector would say, you are not missing out when you are alone. You are finding yourself, finding silence, finding solitude, finding what you have been missing by always being there, always being connected, always being included. What you are missing is yourself, your own company, your own thoughts, your own life. And you will only find this by choosing to miss out, by saying no, by staying home, by being alone, by embracing the solitude you have been avoiding, the silence you have been running from, the meeting with yourself you have been postponing. This is not missing out, is finding, is discovering, is coming home to yourself. Insight 12, the mirror's revelation. And so the mirror has shown you everything, has shown you how you use your phone to avoid solitude, how you use busyness to avoid silence, how you use relationships to avoid yourself, how you perform instead of being real, how you fear missing out on everything except yourself. And the mirror asks, what will you do with this seeing? Will you look away? Will you deny? Will you continue the patterns? Or will you face it? Will you acknowledge it? Will you choose differently? Will you choose solitude? Will you choose silence? Will you choose to meet yourself? And Lispector would say, this is the moment. This is where change becomes possible. Not in the running, not in the avoiding, not in the filling, but in the seeing, in the acknowledgement, in the recognition that you have been running from yourself, that you have been avoiding solitude, that you have been filling every moment to avoid the silence. And now you see, now you know, now you can choose can choose to put down the phone, can choose to create space, can choose to be alone, can choose to be silent, can choose to meet yourself, not because it is easy, not because it is comfortable, but because it is necessary, because it is real, because it is the only way to know yourself, to find yourself, to be yourself. And this choice is frightening, is unfamiliar, is not what you are used to. You are used to running, used to filling, used to avoiding, and now you are being asked to stop, to be still, to be alone, to be silent. And this feels wrong, feels uncomfortable, feels like something is missing. But Lispector would say, nothing is missing. Everything is present. You are present. Your thoughts are present. Your feelings are present. Your truth is present. You have just been too busy to notice, too distracted to feel, too connected to others to connect to yourself. And now is the time. Now is the moment. Now is the invitation to stop running, to stop filling, to stop avoiding, and to start being alone, being silent, being with yourself. This is what the mirror reveals. This is what you must face. This is the path to solitude, to silence, to yourself. Now we descend into the architecture, into Lispector's understanding of solitude and silence, into the philosophy she lived and wrote. This is not abstract theory. It is the wisdom of a woman who knew solitude intimately, who wrote from silence, who understood that being alone is not the same as being lonely, that silence is not empty but full, that in the quiet, in the solitude, something profound happens. You meet yourself, not the self you present to others, but the raw, true, essential self. And this meeting is both terrifying and necessary, is what transforms you, is what makes you whole. This is the architecture, the framework for understanding solitude, for embracing silence, for meeting yourself. Insight 13, solitude is self-encounter. And Lispector understood that solitude is not about being physically alone. It is about being with yourself, about turning inward, about meeting the self that exists beneath all the roles, all the performances, all the ways you present yourself to the world. She wrote, I am alone, but I am not lonely, because in solitude I am with myself. And this self is not nothing, is everything, is what I have been avoiding, what I have been running from, what I have been filling my life with noise and activity and others to avoid facing. And now, in the solitude, I face it. I meet it. I become it. And this meeting is not comfortable, is not easy, because when you are alone, truly alone, you cannot hide, cannot perform, cannot pretend. You are faced with yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your fears, your desires, your truth. And this truth is not always pleasant, not always what you want to see, not always what you have been telling yourself, but it is real, is yours, is what you need to know. And solitude provides this, provides the space, the quiet, the stillness, where you can finally hear yourself, finally see yourself, finally know yourself, not as others see you, not as you present yourself, but as you are, in your essence, in your truth, in your being. And Lispector would say, this is why you avoid solitude. Not because you are afraid of being alone, but because you are afraid of what you will find when you are alone. Afraid of the self you will meet. Afraid it will be empty or too full. Afraid it will be boring or too intense. Afraid it will be nothing or everything. And so you avoid it. Fill every moment. Stay connected. Stay busy. Stay distracted. Anything to not have to face yourself. To not have to meet the self that waits in the solitude. But this avoidance costs you. Costs you self-knowledge. Costs you authenticity. Costs you the ability to be whole. Because you cannot be whole while avoiding yourself. Cannot be authentic while hiding from yourself. Cannot know yourself while running from yourself. And solitude is where the running stops, where the hiding ends, where the meeting happens. And this meeting is not once, is ongoing, is daily practice, is the choice to be alone, to be quiet, to turn inward, to face yourself again and again, because the self changes, evolves, grows, and you must keep meeting it, keep knowing it, keep being with it. This is what solitude offers, not a one-time revelation, but an ongoing relationship with yourself, in yourself, as yourself. And this relationship is the most important one, is the foundation for all others. Because you cannot truly be with others if you cannot be with yourself. Cannot truly love others if you do not know yourself. Cannot truly connect if you are disconnected from yourself. And solitude is where this connection happens, where this knowing develops, where this relationship deepens. Insight 14, silence as language beyond words. And Lispector understood that silence is not the absence of language, is a different kind of language, a language beyond words, a language of being, of presence, of truth. She wrote, I write to understand, but some things cannot be written, cannot be said, can only be felt, can only be known in silence, in the space between words, in the pause between breaths. This is where truth lives, not in what is said, but in what cannot be said, not in words, but in silence. And to know this truth, you must be silent, must stop talking, must stop explaining, must stop filling every space with words, and listen to the silence, listen to what it says, listen to what it knows. And this is difficult, because we are taught that silence is empty, is nothing, is absence. We are taught to fill silence, to make conversation, to avoid awkward pauses, to always have something to say. And in this constant talking, we lose the ability to hear, to listen, to know what silence knows. Because silence knows things words cannot express, knows truths that are too deep for language, knows realities that exist beyond explanation. And when you are silent, when you stop talking, when you stop filling the space with words, you begin to hear this. Begin to know this. Begin to understand what cannot be said but can be felt, can be known, can be lived. And Lispector would say, this is why women especially need silence. Because women are taught to talk, to explain, to make others comfortable, to fill awkward silences, to always have something to say. And in this constant talking, they lose connection to their own truth, to what they know but cannot say, to what they feel but cannot explain, to what they are but cannot express. And silence gives this back, gives back the connection to truth, to feeling, to being, not through words, but through the absence of words, through the space where truth can emerge, where feeling can be felt, where being can be known. And this is profound, is transformative, is what women need, to stop talking, to be silent, to listen to what they know, what they feel, what they are, beyond words, beyond explanation, beyond performance. And silence is not passive, is active, is a choice, is a practice, is the decision to stop talking and start listening, to stop explaining and start feeling, to stop performing and start being. And in this silence, things emerge. Thoughts you did not know you had, feelings you did not know you felt, truths you did not know you knew, because they were always there. But the talking drowned them out. The explaining covered them up. The performing hid them. And now, in the silence, they emerge. They speak. They reveal themselves, not in words, but in knowing, in feeling, in being. And this is what silence offers. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not absence, but presence. Not nothing, but everything. Insight 15, the hour of the star. And Lispector wrote of the hour of the star, the moment when everything becomes clear, when you see, when you understand, when you know, not through thinking, not through analyzing, but through direct experience, through being, through the sudden recognition of truth. And this hour comes in solitude, in silence, in the moment when you stop trying to understand and simply are, when you stop seeking and simply find, when you stop becoming and simply be. This is the hour of the star, the moment of illumination, the instant of knowing, and it cannot be forced, cannot be sought, can only be received in the quiet, in the stillness, in the solitude. And Lispector understood that this hour is not dramatic, is not grand, is often quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible, is the moment when you are alone, perhaps looking at something ordinary, and suddenly you see, you understand, you know, not something new, but something that was always there, something you always knew but never acknowledged, something true, something real, something essential. And this scene changes you, not because you learned something, but because you recognize something, not because you become something, but because you are something. and you finally see it, finally know it, finally are it, without pretense, without performance, without hiding. And this is what solitude offers. This is what silence provides. The space for the hour of the star, the quiet for the moment of seeing, the stillness for the instant of knowing. And you cannot schedule this, cannot plan it, cannot make it happen, can only create the conditions, can only be alone, can only be silent, can only be still, and wait. Wait for the moment. Wait for the seeing. Wait for the knowing. And it will come, not when you expect, not how you imagine, but it will come in the solitude, in the silence, in the being. And when it comes, you will know, will see, will understand, not with your mind, but with your being, not through thinking, but through knowing. And this knowing is what transforms you, is what makes you whole, is what brings you home to yourself. And Lispector would say, do not seek the hour of the star. Seek the solitude. Seek the silence. Seek the being. And the hour will find you, will come to you, will reveal itself to you, not as reward, not as achievement, but as gift, as grace, as the natural result of being alone, being silent, being still, being yourself. This is the architecture. This is the way, not through doing, but through being, not through seeking, but through allowing, not through becoming, but through being. And in this being, the hour of the star comes. The seeing happens. The knowing emerges. And you are transformed, not into something new, but into what you always were, what you always are, what you always will be, your true self, your essential being, your star. Insight 16, the passion according to G.H. And Lispector wrote of passion, not romantic passion, but existential passion, the passion of being, of existing, of facing the raw reality of existence. She wrote of G.H., a woman who, in solitude, faces herself, faces existence, faces the mystery of being. And in this facing, everything she thought she knew falls away. All her roles, all her identities, all her certainties, and she is left with nothing and everything, with the raw fact of existence, of being, of is. And this is terrifying, is overwhelming, is the passion, the suffering, the ecstasy of being alive, of being conscious, of being. And this passion is what happens in solitude, when you strip away all the roles, all the performances, all the ways you define yourself, and you are left with just being, just existing, just is. And this is not comfortable, is not easy, is not what you expected, because you thought you were your roles, thought you were your achievements, thought you were your relationships. But in solitude, these fall away, and you discover you are not these things. You are something else. something more fundamental, something more essential. You are being, you are existence, you are is. And this is both nothing and everything, is both terrifying and liberating, is the passion according to GH, the passion of being stripped of everything and discovering you are still something, still here, still existing, still being. And Lispector would say, this is what you are avoiding. This is what you are afraid of. Not being alone, but being stripped, being reduced, being left with nothing but being, because you have built your identity on so much, on your roles, on your achievements, on your relationships, and you fear that without these, you are nothing. But the truth is the opposite. Without these, you are everything. You are being itself. You are existence itself. You are the raw fact of is. And this is what solitude reveals, what silence shows, what the passion according to GH teaches, that you are not what you do, not what you achieve, not who you are for others. You are being, you are existence, you are is, and this is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. And this passion is not something you seek, is something you undergo, is what happens when you are alone long enough, silent long enough, still long enough, that everything you thought you were falls away, and you are left with what you are. Not who, but what. Not identity, but being. Not self, but existence. And this is the deepest solitude, the most profound silence, the ultimate meaning, not with yourself as person, but with yourself as being, as existence, as is. And this is what transforms you, not by adding something, but by removing everything, until only being remains, only existence, only is. And you discover this is enough. This is everything. This is all there ever was, all there ever is, all there ever will be. Being, existence, is. Inside 17, writing is self-discovery. And Lispector wrote, not to communicate, not to explain, not to tell stories, but to discover, to understand, to know. She wrote, I do not know what I think until I write it. Do not know what I feel until I express it. Do not know who I am until I become it on the page. And writing was her solitude, her silence, her way of being alone with herself, of meeting herself, of knowing herself, not writing for others, but writing for herself, to herself, as herself. And in this writing, she discovered, she understood, she knew, not what she wanted to know, but what she needed to know, not what she expected, but what was true. And this is not just about writing, it is about any form of self-expression, any way of being alone with yourself, of meeting yourself, of knowing yourself. Journaling, art, music, movement, any practice where you are alone, where you are silent, where you are with yourself. And in this practice, you discover, You understand. You know. Not through thinking, but through doing. Not through analyzing, but through expressing. Not through seeking, but through being. And what you discover is not always pleasant, not always what you want, not always comfortable, but is always true, is always real, is always yours. And this is what you need. Not comfort, not pleasure, not what you want, but truth, reality, what is yours. And Lispector would say, find your practice. Find your way of being alone, of being silent, of being with yourself. It does not have to be writing. Can be anything, but it must be solitary, must be silent, must be yours, must be the space where you meet yourself, where you discover yourself, where you know yourself. And do this daily. Do this regularly. Do this as practice, not as achievement, not as productivity, but as being, as meaning, as knowing. And in this practice, you will discover what Lispector discovered, that you are not who you thought you were, that you are more, that you are deeper, that you are mystery, that you are being, that you are enough. And this discovery is not once, is ongoing, is daily, is the practice of solitude, of silence, of being alone with yourself, and knowing yourself, and being yourself. And this practice is not escape, is not avoidance, is not running away from life, is running toward yourself, is facing yourself, is being with yourself. And from this being, from this knowing, from this meaning, you can then be with others, can then engage with life, can then participate in the world, but not from emptiness, not from performance, not from hiding, but from fullness, from authenticity, from truth, because you know yourself, have met yourself, have been with yourself, in the solitude, in the silence, in the practice. And this knowing, this meaning, this being is what makes everything else possible, makes relationship possible, makes love possible, makes life possible, not as performance, not as obligation, not as escape, but as expression, as sharing, as being, from the fullness of solitude, from the truth of silence, from the knowing of self. Insight 18, the architecture complete. And so the architecture is complete. You understand that solitude is self-encounter, is meeting yourself beneath all the roles, all the performances, all the ways you present yourself. You understand that silence is language beyond words, is truth that cannot be said but can be known, can be felt, can be lived. You understand the hour of the star, the moment of seeing, of knowing, of being, that comes in solitude, in silence, in stillness. You understand the passion according to GH, the stripping away of everything until only being remains, only existence, only is. And you understand writing or any practice as self-discovery, as the way of being alone, of being silent, of meeting yourself, and knowing yourself, and being yourself. And this architecture offers you something, offers you a way to understand solitude, not as loneliness, not as isolation, not as punishment, but as gift, as opportunity, as the space where you meet yourself, where you know yourself, where you become yourself, and offers you a way to understand silence, not as emptiness, not as absence, not as nothing, but as fullness, as presence, as everything, as the space where truth lives, where knowing happens, where being is, and offers you a way to practice, to be alone, to be silent, to meet yourself, daily, regularly, consistently, not as obligation, not as achievement, but as being, as living, as becoming who you are. And Lispector would say, this is not easy, is not comfortable, is not what you are used to. You are used to noise, used to company, used to distraction, and now you are being asked to be quiet, to be alone, to be still. And this feels wrong, feels uncomfortable, feels like something is missing, but nothing is missing. Everything is present. You are present. Your truth is present. Your being is present. You have just been too busy to notice, too distracted to feel, too connected to others to connect to yourself. And now is the time. Now is the invitation to be alone, to be silent, to be still, to meet yourself, to know yourself, to be yourself. This is the architecture. This is the way. This is what Lispector offers. Not as theory, not as philosophy, but as lived experience, as practice, as way of being, in solitude, in silence, in truth. Now we descend into the shadows, into the deepest fears, into what you have been avoiding, not just the fear of being alone, but the fear of what being alone will reveal, the fear that in the silence you will hear nothing, that in the solitude you will find emptiness, that when you strip away all the roles, all the relationships, all the doing, there will be nothing left, that you are, in fact, empty, hollow, nothing. And this fear is so deep, so primal, so terrifying that you have organized your entire life around avoiding it, around never having to face it, around never having to know if it is true. But Lispector would say, you must face it, must descend into the shadows, must discover what is really there, not what you fear, but what is. And this descent is necessary, is the only way through, is the path to knowing yourself, to finding yourself, to being yourself. Insight 19, the void you fear. And perhaps the deepest fear is this, that you are empty, that there is nothing inside, that all these years of being for others, doing for others, living for others has left you hollow, that you have given everything away and kept nothing for yourself, that you are a shell, a performance, a collection of roles with no center, no core, no self. And this fear is paralyzing, is why you cannot be alone, cannot be silent, cannot stop. Because if you stop, if you are quiet, if you are alone, you might discover this emptiness. And then what? Then who are you? Then what is the point? Then how do you continue? And Lispector understood this fear, understood that we are terrified of our own emptiness, terrified that we will look inside and find a void, find nothing, find that we are not as substantial as we pretend, not as deep as we hope, not as real as we need to be. And so we avoid looking, avoid the inward turn, avoid solitude, avoid silence. Because as long as we are busy, as long as we are with others, as long as we are doing, we can pretend we are full, can pretend we are substantial, can pretend we are real. But alone, in silence, the pretense falls away, and we fear we will discover the void, the emptiness, the nothing. But Lispector would also say, you must look, must face the void, must descend into the emptiness, not because it will be comfortable, not because it will be easy, but because it is the only way to discover the truth. And the truth is not what you fear. The truth is that the void is not empty, is full, full of potential, full of possibility, full of everything you have been too afraid to be, too afraid to feel, too afraid to know. The void is not absence, is presence, is the space where everything can emerge, where your true self can be born, where your authentic life can begin. But you cannot know this until you face it, until you descend, until you look into the void and discover it is not void at all, is fullness, is everything, is you. And this descent requires courage, requires the willingness to be alone, to be silent, to face what you have been avoiding, to look into the emptiness and not run, to stay, to be present, to discover what is really there. And what you will find is not nothing, is not emptiness, is not void, is yourself, your true self, the self that has been waiting, the self that has been buried, the self that has been hidden beneath all the roles, all the doing, all the being for others. This self is not empty, is full, full of thoughts you have never thought, feelings you have never felt, desires you have never acknowledged, dreams you have never pursued. This self is everything, and it has been waiting for you, in the void, in the emptiness, in the silence, waiting for you to be brave enough to look, to face, to discover. Insight 20, the death of who you thought you were. And in solitude, something dies. Not you, but who you thought you were. The identity you built, the self you presented, the person you pretended to be. In solitude, this dies, falls away, dissolves, and this feels like death, feels like loss, feels like you are disappearing, because you have identified with this false self for so long, have believed this is who you are, have built your entire life around maintaining this identity. And now, in the solitude, it is dying, and you are terrified, because if this is not you, then who are you? If this identity dies, what remains? If this self dissolves, what is left? And Lispector understood this death, understood that solitude is a kind of dying, a letting go, a release of who you thought you were, of who you tried to be, of who others needed you to be. And this dying is painful, is frightening, is the shadow, because you do not know what will emerge. Do not know who you will be without this identity. Do not know if there is anything beneath it. And so you resist. You cling. You try to maintain the old self, the old identity, the old way of being, even though it is killing you, even though it is false, even though it is not really you. Because the known, even if painful, feels safer than the unknown. The familiar, even if false, feels more secure than the mystery of who you really are. But Lispector would say, let it die. Let the false self dissolve. Let the old identity fall away. Not because it was bad, not because you were wrong, but because it is not you. Never was you. Was only a construction, a performance, a way of surviving. And now you no longer need it. Now you can let it go. Now you can allow the death. And in this death, something is born. Not a new identity, not a new self to construct, but your true self, your essential being, the you that has always been there, beneath the performance, beneath the roles, beneath the identity. This you does not need to be constructed, does not need to be performed, does not need to be maintained, simply is, simply exists, simply being. And this is what emerges when the false self dies, when the old identity dissolves, when you allow the death and solitude. And this emergence is not dramatic, is not sudden, is gradual, is gentle, is the slow recognition that you are still here, still existing, still being, even without the identity, even without the roles, even without the performance. You are, and this is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. You do not need to be anyone. Do not need to do anything. Do not need to prove anything. You simply are. And in this being, in this existence, in this is, you discover who you really are. Not who you thought you were. Not who you tried to be. But who you are. In your essence. In your truth. In your being. And this is the gift of the death. The gift of the shadow. The gift of solitude. The death of the false. And the birth of the true. Insight 21, the loneliness that is not loneliness. And in solitude, you will feel lonely. This is inevitable, is part of the process, is the shadow. You will feel the absence of others, the lack of connection, the silence where voices used to be. And this will hurt, will feel like abandonment, will feel like you are alone in a way that is unbearable. And Lispector would say, this is not loneliness. This is solitude. And there is a difference. Loneliness is the pain of disconnection, is the feeling that you are separate, that you are isolated, that you are cut off from others. But solitude is different, is the experience of being with yourself, of being connected to yourself, of being whole in yourself. And the pain you feel is not loneliness, is the pain of transition, the pain of letting go of the need for others to complete you, the pain of discovering you are complete in yourself. And this pain is real, is valid, is part of the shadow, because you have been taught that you need others, that you are incomplete alone. That connection is outside yourself. And now you are discovering this is not true, that you are complete. That connection is within, that you do not need others to be whole. And this discovery is painful because it means letting go of the dependency, letting go of the need, letting go of the belief that you are not enough alone. And this letting go feels like loss, feels like loneliness, feels like you are losing something essential. But you are not losing. You are finding yourself, finding your wholeness, finding your completeness in yourself, not in others, not in connection, but in solitude, in being alone, in being with yourself. And Lispector would say, sit with this pain. Do not run from it. Do not fill it. Do not avoid it. Sit with it. Feel it. Let it be. Because this pain is the doorway, is the passage, is the way through. On the other side of this pain is not more loneliness, is solitude, is the discovery that you are not alone, that you are with yourself, that you are enough, that you are complete, that you do not need others to fill you, to complete you, to make you whole. You are already whole, already complete, already enough. And this pain is the price of discovering this, is the shadow you must walk through, is the loneliness that is not loneliness, but the birth of solitude, the discovery of self, the recognition of wholeness. And when you emerge from this pain, when you walk through this shadow, when you discover you are not lonely but in solitude, everything changes. You can then be with others, can then connect, can then love, but not from need, not from emptiness, not from the desperate attempt to fill yourself with someone else, but from fullness, from wholeness, from completeness. You connect not because you need to, but because you choose to. You love not because you are empty, but because you are full. And this love, this connection, this relationship is different, is real, is authentic, is not performance, not need, not desperation, but choice, gift, sharing from the fullness of solitude, from the wholeness of self, from the completeness of being. Insight 22, the silence that screams. And in the silence, you will hear things, not pleasant things, not comfortable things, but true things. You will hear your own voice, your own thoughts, your own feelings, without the filter of others, without the distraction of noise, without the drowning out of constant stimulation. And what you hear may shock you, may disturb you, may be things you have been avoiding, anger you did not know you had, sadness you have been suppressing, desires you have been denying, truths you have been hiding from, And the silence amplifies these, makes them loud, makes them unavoidable, makes them scream. And Lispector understood this, understood that silence is not peaceful, not always, not at first, is confrontational, is revealing, is the space where everything you have been avoiding comes to the surface, comes to consciousness, demands to be heard, and you cannot run, cannot distract, cannot drown it out, because you are alone, you are silent, you are still, and there is nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one to be, except yourself, with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your truth. And this truth is loud, is insistent, is the silence that screams. And this is the shadow. This is what you have been avoiding. Not the silence itself, but what the silence reveals, what it brings to the surface, what it makes you face. And facing this is painful, is difficult, is why you have been filling every moment with noise, with activity, with others, to avoid this, to avoid hearing, to avoid knowing. But Lispector would say, you must hear, must listen, must face what the silence reveals, not because it will be pleasant, but because it is true, and you cannot live authentically while avoiding your truth, cannot be whole while suppressing your feelings, cannot be free while denying your desires. You must hear, must listen, must face, even when it screams, even when it hurts, even when you want to run. And when you do this, when you listen to the silence that screams, when you face what it reveals, something shifts. The screaming quiets, not because the truth goes away, but because you have heard it, have acknowledged it, have given it space, and now it does not need to scream, can speak, can whisper, can simply be, and the silence becomes different, becomes peaceful, becomes the space where truth lives, not screaming, but present, not demanding, but available, not overwhelming, but clear. And this is the gift of facing the shadow, of listening to the silence that screams, of hearing what you have been avoiding. The truth becomes available, becomes accessible, becomes something you can live with, can integrate, can be. Insight 23, the nothingness that is everything. And at the deepest level of solitude, at the bottom of the descent, you encounter nothingness, not as concept, not as philosophy, but as experience, as reality, as the stripping away of everything until nothing remains. No roles, no identity, no doing, no being for others, just nothing, just void, just emptiness. And this is terrifying, is the ultimate shadow, is what you have been most afraid of. That beneath everything, you are nothing. That when everything is stripped away, nothing remains. That you are, in essence, void, empty, nothing. And Lispector knew this nothingness, wrote about it, lived it, and she would say, do not run from it, do not avoid it, Do not fill it. Face it. Enter it. Be it. Because this nothingness is not what you think, is not absence, is not emptiness, is not void, is potential, is possibility, is the space where everything can be, where everything can emerge, where everything can become. The nothingness is not the end, is the beginning, is not death, is birth, is not emptiness, is fullness, fullness of potential, fullness of possibility, fullness of everything that can be. And when you face this nothingness, when you enter it, when you allow yourself to be nothing, something profound happens. You discover you are not nothing. You are everything. Not in the sense of having everything, but in the sense of being everything, being potential, being possibility, being the space where anything can emerge. You are not defined, not limited, not fixed. You are open. You are free. You are infinite. And this is what the nothingness reveals. Not that you are nothing, but that you are not thing, not a fixed thing, not a defined thing, not a limited thing, but being itself, existence itself, potential itself. And this is everything. This is freedom. This is truth. And Lispector would say, this is what solitude offers. This is what silence reveals. This is what the shadow teaches. That you are not what you think you are. Not the roles. Not the identity. Not the doing. Not even the self you have constructed. You are deeper. You are more fundamental. You are being itself. And this being is not nothing, is everything, is the source, is the ground, is the foundation of everything you are, everything you can be, everything you will be. And you can only know this by descending, by facing the shadows, by entering the nothingness, and discovering it is not nothing, is everything, is you, in your deepest essence, in your truest being, in your most fundamental reality. You are not nothing. You are everything. And this is what the shadows reveal. And now we arrive at integration, at the place where understanding becomes practice, where insight becomes life, where Lispector's wisdom about solitude and silence becomes your daily reality. This is not about becoming a hermit, not about rejecting connection, not about living in isolation. It is about learning to be alone, to be silent, to be with yourself, so that when you are with others, you are truly present, truly authentic, truly yourself. This is the integration, the practice of solitude in the midst of life, the embrace of silence in the midst of noise, the discovery that you can be alone and not lonely, can be silent and not empty, can be yourself and be enough. This is what Lispector offers, not as theory, not as philosophy, but as way of living, as daily practice, as integration of solitude into life. Insight 24, the practice of daily solitude. And solitude is not something you do once, not a retreat you take, not a weekend away. Is daily practice, is the choice every day to be alone, to be silent, to be with yourself, even if only for moments, even if only for minutes, even in the midst of busy life, even surrounded by others. You can practice solitude, can create space, can turn inward, can be with yourself. And this practice is what transforms. Not the grand gesture, not the dramatic change, but the daily choice, the consistent practice, the regular return to yourself, to silence, to solitude. And Lispector would say, find your practice. Find your way of being alone. It might be morning coffee in silence. Might be evening walk alone. Might be writing in your journal. Might be sitting in stillness. Might be any practice where you are alone, where you are silent, where you are with yourself. And do this daily, not as obligation, not as should, but as gift, as necessity, as the way you stay connected to yourself, the way you hear your own voice, the way you know your own truth. This daily practice is not luxury, is not optional, is essential, is how you remain yourself, how you stay whole, how you live authentically. And perhaps you think you do not have time. Your life is too busy, too full, too demanding. And Lispector would say, you do not have time not to. Because without this practice, you lose yourself, lose connection to yourself, lose the ability to hear your own voice, to know your own truth, to be yourself. And then what is the point of all the busyness? All the doing? All the being for others? If you have lost yourself in the process? The practice of daily solitude is not taking time from life, is giving life to your time, is ensuring that in all the doing you remain, you exist, you are. And this is worth the time, worth the space, worth the practice. And the practice does not have to be long, does not have to be perfect, does not have to be anything other than being alone, being silent, being with yourself. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can create, whatever space you can find, use it, be in it, practice solitude. And over time, this practice accumulates, deepens, becomes part of who you are. Not something you do, but how you are. Not an activity, but a way of being. And this is the integration. This is how solitude becomes not separate from life, but woven into life, part of life, essential to life. The daily practice of being alone, being silent, being yourself. Insight 25, solitude in relationship. And perhaps you think solitude means being alone, means not having relationships, means isolation. But Lispector would say the opposite is true. Solitude makes relationship possible, real relationship, authentic connection. Because when you know yourself in solitude, when you are whole in yourself, when you are complete in yourself, you can then be with others. Not from need, not from emptiness, not from the desperate attempt to fill yourself with someone else, but from fullness, from wholeness, from completeness. And this changes everything. changes how you relate, how you connect, how you love. And when you practice solitude, when you know yourself, when you are comfortable being alone, you bring a different quality to relationship. You are not clingy, not needy, not desperate. You are present. You are authentic. You are yourself. And you can allow the other to be themselves, can give them space, can let them be, because you do not need them to complete you, to fill you, to make you whole. You are already whole, already complete, already enough. And from this wholeness, you can truly connect, can truly see the other, can truly love, not as need, not as dependency, but as choice, as gift, as sharing of two whole people, two complete beings, two authentic selves. And Lispector understood this, understood that the best relationships are between two solitudes, two people who know themselves, who are comfortable alone, who are whole in themselves, and who choose to be together, not because they need to, but because they want to, not to fill emptiness, but to share fullness, not to complete each other, but to complement each other. Two wholes, two completes, two authentic beings, choosing connection, choosing relationship, choosing love, from the foundation of solitude, from the ground of self-knowledge, from the wholeness of being alone and being enough. This is what makes relationship real, makes connection authentic, makes love true. And so the practice of solitude does not take you away from relationship, prepares you for relationship, real relationship, authentic connection, deep love, because you bring yourself, your whole self, your authentic self, not the needy self, not the empty self, not the desperate self, but the whole self, the complete self, the self that knows itself in solitude and is ready to share itself in relationship. This is the integration. This is how solitude and relationship are not opposites, but complements, not contradictions, but necessities. You need solitude to know yourself, and you need relationship to share yourself. And both are essential. Both are necessary. Both are part of being fully human, fully alive, fully yourself. Insight 26, the silence that speaks truth. And as you practice solitude, as you spend time in silence, you discover something. You discover that silence speaks, not in words, not in explanations, not in arguments, but in truth, in knowing, in clarity. The silence tells you things you could not hear in the noise, shows you things you could not see in the distraction, reveals truths you could not know in the constant doing. And this is the gift of silence. Not that it is empty, but that it is full, full of truth, full of knowing, full of clarity. And you can only access this by being silent, by stopping the talking, by ending the explaining, by allowing the silence to speak. And Lispector would say, trust the silence. Trust what it reveals. Trust what it shows you, even when it contradicts what you have been told. even when it challenges what you believe, even when it asks you to change. Trust it, because the silence does not lie, does not perform, does not pretend. The silence is truth, is reality, is what is. And when you listen to it, when you trust it, when you follow it, you live authentically, live truly, live as yourself, not as who you should be, not as who others need you to be, but as who you are, in your essence, in your truth, in your being. And this trust is not easy, because the silence often tells you things you do not want to hear, tells you to leave what is comfortable, to change what is familiar, to let go of what is safe. The silence asks you to be brave, to be honest, to be real. And this is frightening, is uncomfortable, is not what you are used to. But Lispector would say, this is the only way to live authentically, to live truly, to live as yourself. You must trust the silence, must follow its truth, must live what it reveals, even when it is difficult, even when it is scary, even when it asks everything of you, because the alternative is living a lie, living inauthentically, living as someone you are not. And this is worse than any discomfort, worse than any fear, worse than any difficulty. Living as yourself, even when hard, is better than living as someone else, even when easy. And as you practice listening to silence, as you trust what it reveals, as you live its truth, something happens. You become more yourself, more authentic, more real, not because you are trying, not because you are performing, but because you are listening, are trusting, are following. The silence guides you, shows you, reveals you to yourself, and you become who you are, not who you thought you were, not who you tried to be, but who you are, in your essence, in your truth, in your being. And this is the integration. This is living from silence. This is trusting the truth that silence speaks, and becoming yourself in the process. Insight 27, writing your own truth. And Lispector wrote, not to be understood, not to be famous, not to achieve, but to discover, to understand, to know. She wrote to find out what she thought, what she felt, what she was. And writing was her practice of solitude, her way of being alone, her method of listening to silence. And you can do this too. Can write, can journal, can express, not for others, not for publication, not for achievement, but for yourself, for discovery, for knowing. Writing is practice of solitude, as way of listening to silence, as method of knowing yourself. And when you write, when you put words on page, something happens. Things become clear. Thoughts become visible. Feelings become known. You discover what you think by writing it. Discover what you feel by expressing it. Discover who you are by becoming it on the page. And this is not about being a writer, not about being good, not about being anything other than honest. Real, true. You write what is true for you, what is real for you, What is you? And in this writing, you discover, you understand, you know, not what you should think, not what you should feel, not what you should be, but what you do think, what you do feel, what you are. And Lispector would say, write every day, even if only a few lines, even if only a few words, even if it feels pointless. Write, because writing is how you stay connected to yourself, how you hear your own voice, how you know your own truth. Writing is practice of solitude, is listening to silence, is being with yourself. And in this practice, you remain yourself. Stay authentic. Live truly. Not because you are trying, but because you are practicing, are writing, are expressing, are discovering every day, in small ways, in quiet moments, in the practice of putting truth on page. Your truth, your voice, yourself. And this writing does not have to be shared, does not have to be read by anyone, can be private, can be just for you, can be the space where you are completely honest, completely real, completely yourself, without performance, without pretense, without hiding, just you, on the page, in words, in truth. And this is enough. This is the practice. This is how writing becomes integration of solitude, becomes daily practice of being alone, being silent, being yourself, and discovering in the writing who you are, what you think, what you feel, what you know, what you are becoming. This is the gift of writing. This is Lispector's practice. This is what you can do every day, in solitude, in silence, in truth. Insight 28, the hour of your star. And as you practice solitude, as you listen to silence, as you write your truth, something happens. Your hour of the star comes, not when you expect, not how you imagine, but it comes, the moment of seeing, of knowing, of being, the moment when everything becomes clear, when you understand, when you know who you are, not through thinking, not through analyzing, but through being, through the direct experience of yourself. In solitude, in silence, in truth, this is your hour of the star, your moment of illumination, your instant of knowing, and it is gift, is grace, is the natural result of the practice. And Lispector would say, do not seek this moment. Do not try to make it happen. Do not force it. Just practice. Just be alone. Just be silent. Just be yourself. And the moment will come, will find you, will reveal itself to you, not as achievement, not as reward, but as recognition, as seeing, as knowing. You will suddenly see who you are, will suddenly know what you are, will suddenly be yourself, without pretense, without performance, without hiding, just you, in your essence, in your truth, in your being, And this seeing, this knowing, this being is your hour of the star, is your moment, is your truth. And when this moment comes, when you see, when you know, when you are, everything changes. Not externally, not in circumstances, but internally, in how you see yourself, in how you know yourself, in how you are yourself. You are no longer performing, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. You are simply being, simply existing, simply yourself. And this is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. You do not need to be more. Do not need to do more. Do not need to prove more. You simply are. And this is your star, your light, your truth, shining, not for others, but for yourself, in yourself, as yourself. And this is the integration. This is what the practice leads to. Not perfection, not achievement, not becoming someone else, but becoming yourself, seeing yourself, knowing yourself, being yourself, in solitude, in silence, in truth. This is your hour of the star. This is your moment. This is your life. Lived authentically. Live truly. Lived as yourself. From the practice of solitude. From the listening to silence. From the writing of truth. From the daily choice to be alone. To be quiet. To be yourself. This is the integration. This is the life. This is you. In your fullness. In your wholeness. In your truth. Your star. Shining. Insight 29, living from solitude. And so you learn to live from solitude. Not in solitude, but from solitude. You practice being alone, being silent, being with yourself. And from this practice, you live. You engage with the world. You connect with others. You participate in life, but not from emptiness, not from need, not from the desperate attempt to fill yourself, but from fullness, from wholeness, from completeness. You live from the solitude, from the self-knowledge, from the truth you have discovered in silence. And this changes everything, changes how you live, how you relate, how you are. And living from solitude means you are not dependent, not needy, not desperate. You are grounded. You are centered. You are yourself. And from this ground, from this center, from this self, you engage. You connect. You love. But not to fill yourself. Not to complete yourself. Not to make yourself whole. You are already whole. Already complete. Already full. And you engage, connect, love from this fullness. From this wholeness. From this completeness. And this is different, is authentic, is real, is not performance, not need, not desperation, but choice, gift, sharing from the fullness of solitude, from the wholeness of self, from the completeness of being. And Lispector would say, this is the goal, not to be alone, but to be able to be alone, not to avoid others, but to not need others to be whole, not to reject connection, but to choose connection from wholeness. This is living from solitude. This is the integration. This is what the practice creates. The ability to be alone without being lonely, to be silent without being empty, to be yourself without needing validation, to be whole without needing completion, to be enough without needing more. This is living from solitude. This is the life. This is what Lispector offers. Not as theory, not as philosophy, but as practice, as way of living, as integration of solitude into every moment, every relationship, every choice, every breath. And this living from solitude is not easy, is not automatic, is daily practice, is constant choice, is returning again and again to yourself, to silence, to solitude, when you feel lost, when you feel empty, when you feel like you are losing yourself. You return, you practice, you be alone, you be silent, you be yourself. And from this return, from this practice, from this being, you live, you engage, you connect, but always from the ground of solitude, always from the center of self, always from the wholeness of being. This is the integration. This is the practice. This is the life. Lived from solitude, lived in truth, lived as yourself. Inside 30, the gift of solitude. And so we arrive at the end. And Lispector would say, solitude is not punishment, is not isolation, is not loneliness, is gift, is the space where you meet yourself, where you know yourself, where you become yourself, is the silence where truth speaks, where clarity emerges, where knowing happens, is the practice that makes everything else possible, makes relationship real, makes connection authentic, makes life true. Solitude is not what you avoid, is what you embrace, is what you practice, is what you live from. This is the gift. This is what Lispector offers. This is what you can have. If you are brave enough, if you are willing, if you choose, and the choice is yours, you can continue to run, continue to fill every moment, continue to avoid being alone, continue to fear silence, continue to lose yourself in the noise, or you can stop, can be still, can be alone, can be silent, can be yourself, can practice solitude, can listen to silence, can discover who you are, can live from this discovery, can be authentic, can be real, can be whole. This is the choice. This is the invitation. This is what your life is asking of you. Will you answer? Will you practice? Will you be alone? Will you be silent? Will you meet yourself? Will you live from solitude? This is the question. This is the call. This is the gift waiting for you in the solitude, in the silence, in yourself. The journey is complete. You've traveled far tonight, through shadows, through light, through depths most never see. Your mind has done its work. You can rest now. This is the still point, your anchor in the sea of thought, a place you can always return to whenever the world becomes too loud. Thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting this space, for trusting yourself. Sleep well. Good night.